Hello everyone, in this video I want to talk about a class I'm working on currently, which is called the combined parameter. But first of all, let me demonstrate it. So let's say we have a parameter, in this case a simple normalized parameter between 0 and 1. And we have a second parameter, and this doesn't even have to be another knob, it can be like a sine wave or an envelope follower. In this case, a sine wave, a very slow sine wave. And this sine wave is supposed to be kind of added to the parameter that is already there. Maybe I can bring that idea across better with a faster oscillator. So you see it kinda oscillates around the value that has already been set. But is that everything? No, it isn't. We can add multiple parameters, in fact an unlimited amount of parameters to this. Even though in this example I only have 3. And also there are different modes. An example for this is if you look very closely to the numbers, at the moment they can go below and above the range of the first parameter, which was 0 and 1, because the combined values can just go above and below 0 and 1, especially considering that an oscillator goes between -1 and 1 by default anyway. So what can we do about that? Well, I have implemented different modes, or more like parameter types. I call them parameter types. And by default you select the parameter type none. But now I activated the parameter type clip, which is basically it just lets the parameters clip. Now you see the combined value just stays at the edge. To demonstrate this a little bit further, we can also set a range. Now there's a third type, but in order to explain the third type I have to tell you about another concept that is part of the class combined parameter. They are sort of priorities, and whenever you add a new parameter, or more like the pointer to a new parameter, then you also give it a priority. But you can also just give it no priority and we will set priorities automatically in some way that I will explain very soon. Now the flex mode expects that you give it normalized values. And I will demonstrate what that means now. Let's say you have a parameter and this is the parameter with the highest priority. And you have a second parameter. Now the parameter goes the full range. And see how it behaves. With the flex mode, your parameter will definitely not clip, and it will still do something when you turn up the knobs, but it will always be relative to the parameter that had the bigger priority. And this can also be stacked with an unlimited amount of parameters. And as you can see, this gives a cool skewing factor as well. It kind of makes the parameters go with a different acceleration at some points. It kind of gives it some type of weight. I'm not sure if I've seen that in a lot of plugins yet. I think Melder does it sometimes, but I think it's pretty cool, even though I know the default behavior is just clipping. However, how did I do all that? First of all, there are a lot of helper classes that you hopefully don't mind, just a little oscillator, some custom sliders, and a class for drawing the values on the screen. But we will be looking mostly at the enum class parameter type and the class combined parameter. There's the enum class parameter type, which describes the type of the parameter, as you have already seen. And then there's the class combined parameter. And when you construct a new combined parameter, you are being asked for the parameter type and for the range. So the range by default is 0 to 1, a normalized range, and the parameter type by default is just no parameter type. And then there's the value, a float value that is being output in the end, and that's what you connect to any processes or something, like the cutoff from a filter or something. Now when you add a new parameter, it's not as easy as it might seem if you think of it, because you want them to be sorted in some way while you add them. They aren't just being pushed back all the time, because the priority matters. At least if the user sets a priority. But even if he doesn't, they must be sorted somehow. So how are they sorted? If the size is 0, so if the vector currently holds no object, and if the user didn't decide for a new priority, -1 is the default value for no one said what I should do, then push back, just push it back with the value 1. Else, the user decided for a priority, well then push it back with that priority. Now this is not the first value in the vector. Then go through the vector and look, is the priority given by the argument bigger than the parameter priority? Which is not the case by default, because the default parameter for the first parameter, as you know, is 1. So that would mean that you go through the whole vector without adding anything and then push back. That means all the values will always come at the end and therefore be sorted by the last added parameter is the one with the lowest priority. This is the default behavior. But if you change this behavior by writing your own priorities, then it would be very easy, just at the point where it makes sense, insert the parameter with the given values from the arguments and then return from the function, because everything has been done and we don't want it to add another parameter. If you want to remove a parameter, it just goes through the vector, and if the parameter kind of has the same at this point, I must say I just found something out about pointers. Maybe I find the right words for it. A pointer is basically a value that has two different values somehow. If you just refer to the pointer itself, it is kind of like an ID. And if you do this, then it's the ID's actual value, which is cool because that makes this kind of two different values at the same time. And that can be used in structures like that, because you can just use it in this case, like, are the IDs the same? Okay, then erase the parameter with that ID somehow and then return. Another thing that I recently found out that kind of blew my mind was that you can just return from a void as long as you don't return a value, and in this case it would just mean stop with anything that still happens in this function. So in this case, stop looking at the rest of the loop, doesn't matter anymore. Now get value, this is the method that you would call if you want to actually use the value from this combined parameter. So it just looks which parameter type is being set at the moment and then do the stuff. For example, no parameter type, then just calculate the value. Just add all values together. Or if clipping, then just add all values together and then J-limit it with a range. Of the flex mode, calculate value flexibly. It's a little bit more complicated. It's like if there's something in the vector, then use the first value on value and then look at all the other values. And then if the parameter is higher than 0, then do this mix calculation and else do this mix calculation. I had to fiddle around with it a little bit in Desmos before I came up with it, so it's still hard for me to actually get what I was doing there. You probably know these moments, but I somehow came up with the solution. But I'm also still aware of the problems this has. For example, this only works if you have normalized values and if they kinda make sense together. So you can't just like combine any parameters with each other and they will make cool stuff in the flex mode. No, that doesn't work. It's still a very limited mode, but I'm working on it and I find it pretty cool for now because most of the times you're probably using normalized values for a lot of stuff anyway, because that's just more flexible and everything. So in the end, it returns the pointer to that value because I wanted to give the user the option, even though it's maybe a bit far-fetched, to just combine a combined parameter with another combined parameter and therefore make an unlimited amount of unlimited amounts of parameters. I don't know if that even is something that anyone wants to do, but I wanted to give that option, and you could easily rewrite this to just give back just the value itself, which would also make sense, but I didn't do that. However, I'm pretty proud of myself with the pointer work, especially when we look at the parameter itself. Then I decided to make this a pointer. That was a very special moment for me as a programmer because I'm still a noob and that was the first time in my life that I actually found a nice use case for pointers. Until now, I thought that pointers are kind of scary and a little bit unintuitive, but in this case I found that this is actually the best way to describe what I want this to do. Because if I didn't have the option to use a pointer here, then that would mean that we have to send all the parameter values constantly to the combined parameter class, and that seems kinda like the wrong way to look at this problem, because if you can just send the pointer, then that's like saying, hey, combined parameter class, just remember that there is an object around there that does all this stuff and it can change. It could change at any moment, but just look constantly at it. And I won't tell you another time, just do it from now until I tell you to stop with the remove parameter method. And that's actually what the pointer does in this case. And I suspect this to create a more tidied up code. So when I'm actually writing all the DSP stuff, I can focus more on the actual effects and not so much on the routing of the parameters, because there won't be anything in the process methods. You know, always these process methods that are called for each sample and stuff. There won't be anything about the combined parameter in there then, because the combined parameter will just look at the values without such a method, which makes it look nicer together with the other stuff that will be in the code. At least that's what I'm expecting, because I didn't test it yet in a real plugin, but as you've seen in the visualization, it seems like it would work, and I guess it does, because it's not that complex that there could be many mistakes in it. But I mean, I will just see. And I found this pretty cool, because I think this is a really important step as an audio programmer, to have a little helper class for macros. A lot of plugins still don't have makros, I don't know, but they should. I mean, look at Serum. Serum is the most popular synthesizer there is. And the most popular synthesizer before Serum was Massive. And the biggest difference between these synthesizers and other synthesizers is that they have macros. And macros, they enable the user to make very complex modulations with just one knob. No one in 2020 wants to turn a knob and then just want one thing to happen. They want something really wild to happen. Even if they have to set it up all themselves, or even if some of them maybe even like it, like me, I'm a sound designer, and others just want to use these patches then, and they want to turn one knob, and this knob has to change everything. It has to change their life. It has to change their universe. Everything. It shouldn't just change a cutoff from a filter or something. It should do a lot. It should do infinitely lot. And that's why the combined parameter class could be used in a very powerful way. And I know I've been talking about synthesizers here, but imagine the possibilities. You could use it for effects as well. You could, like I did, like I planned, I want to use it for a filter with an envelope follower, maybe even with an LFO, with anything. And I think that's really powerful. And a lot of people are missing that in their plugins. A lot of developers just try to emulate some old compression because they think that's the iconic gear and people love iconic gear. But my approach is rather to look at what is the thing that you couldn't do analogly. What is the thing that makes the digital approach so special and in some sense better than the analog approach? Developers like FabFilter or Oak Sound show the world that a modern approach to the workflow with plugins is the approach of success. However, it was nice to have you around in the video. If you want to leave a comment in which you describe what you feel about this class or anything, my presentation, I'm still learning and stuff. Also, if you have any ideas what I could add here or what I didn't write in a very nice way, maybe whatever you think of would be constructive. I know there's not a lot of communication on my channel, but just feel free to say something if you have any thoughts on this. Okay, bye.